welcome to me because I'm in your home in Austin, Texas.
That's soon to be heavily treated for mold.
That's
even
right.
though don't have a lot here.
That's right. This is a beautiful place, and we came down here to talk about what to do with it.
Yep.
Now I know. Well, let's actually before we get into this home, tell me a little bit about your personal story. I know a lot of people know. You started a kind of your health journey around mold. Maybe you've seen the Moldy documentary, but how did you get to a place where we're sitting here and you are looking at treating your whole home?
Well, I grew up in a basement that had been flooded in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We didn't know about toxic mold then, but I had all the symptoms of mold poisoning, autism, and mold does not cause autism, but it can be an important ingredient in the recipe for autism. You have to have the right genetics and things like that. And mold also, one of the symptoms of it is chronic strep throat, which I had for 15 years. And chronic strep throat also causes weird autoimmune things and behavioral things like ADHD and something called PANDAS, which I had, which gives you OCD. And my favorite one is ODD. Have you heard of that?
No.
Oppositional defiant disorder.
Oh.
And this is when that Rage Against the Machine song, F you, I won't do what you told me, it plays constantly in your head. And if someone tells you to do something, before you can think, you're like, no, you can't make me. So, needless to say, my Dave's a good boy file was not very big, but Dave's a bad boy file was very high. And so there was a lot of health stuff that came out of that. I had arthritis in my knees since I was 14, and just all kinds of health problems. By the time I was in my mid-20s, I had been diagnosed with arthritis, high risk of stroke and heart attack. I had chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia, which are probably the same thing. Crippling brain fog to the point that I bought disability insurance in my 20s because I wasn't sure if I could really keep going. And it's this feeling like you have the pedal all the way to the floor in your car and it's slowing down. And like you can push harder, but there's no more push to give, right? And so I went to all these functional medicine doctors. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to get well. And I just wanted my brain to work. And fortunately for me, I was a computer hacker. And I started hanging out with people in their 80s and 90s running the first longevity group in the Bay Area. So I got mentored by the leaders in what is now functional medicine, even though that was just what I kind of did for fun, because I just wanted my brain to work. I didn't want my body to hurt all the time the way it did. So, well, let's say it was a lot of work and a lot of suffering. And when I unpacked all this stuff, I went to a guy in Los Altos, California, in the Bay Area, who's this old, wise functional medicine doctor. And he said, Dave, the people I treat don't come back. He said, you've been back 5 times. That's unheard of in my practice. I want to run an HIV test on you because I don't think you have it. You don't have any of the behavior patterns, but why are you not getting well? This doesn't make any sense. Of course, I didn't have HIV, but I did have an allergic response to 10 of the top 12 toxic molds out there. And that was like, aha, I get this. And along the way, I'm like, oh, I had that probably when I was a kid, certainly all the symptoms of it. And I moved into a place in the Bay Area that had massive water damage in the bedroom. And I got really sick when I moved there. My dog got pneumonia, and my partner at the time gained 30 pounds and got really sick, and we both had this weird brain fog. I'm like, oh, well, we moved out of that place. But right after we moved out, I found slimy black mold on the back of the drywall. That was where the headboard was, because the neighbor's water heater was leaking. I'm like, aha, smoking guns. And then I moved into a place where water would pool underneath it when it rained. I got sicker. And I found this, like, you know what? This is mold. So I learned how to detox. And I'm like, why did no one say anything? And then I realized that there was this small pool of experts who had been talking about mold for a long time. And most of them are kind of mavericks because they're saying, well, why is everyone missing this? And along the way, I became an expert in mitochondrial biology because when my doctor couldn't help me earlier on, I just fired him. And for 4 years, I studied energy production in the human body as a scientist, but a computer scientist. I'm like, I have to solve this problem because I'm gonna die, or at least I feel like I'm gonna die if I don't. So I learned that mold toxins, about 200 of them, are direct mitochondrial poisons. So your mitochondria can't do their job And since that time, I've learned mitochondria are basically the seat of consciousness in the body. They're much more important than just energy production. They're actually energetic sensors and environmental sensors. And they get stressed by these toxins. And what I learned was that environmental toxins are the worst from toxic mold. But we also eat a lot of toxins that become a trigger. And during this path, I quit coffee for 5 years. And they were long, dark, horrible years, because coffee is actually really good. And I came back from a trip to Tibet, because I studied consciousness and meditation and all. I just want things to work. I don't want to feel anxious all the time, and mold makes you feel anxious and tired all the time. And I drank a cup of coffee, and I felt amazing. It was like the lights turned back on. And I'm not allergic anymore, yay! Because every time I drink coffee, an hour or two later, I get like this jitter, this feeling in my chest, like, ah. So, day after, I had another cup of coffee, and then I felt the symptoms. I thought, wait, I didn't get allergic overnight, it's the coffee. So I went down this, wow, here's how much mold is in peanuts versus wheat versus coffee. And I found out coffee is a serious mold risk food. I ended up launching a massive coffee company called Bulletproof. And today I run Danger Coffee, which is mold free and contains special minerals that actually bind to toxins. So it's like this whole path of longevity, and I'm a leader in the longevity movement, really came from being sick as a kid from toxic mold. I had another experience in Palo Alto when I was there, where I had a leaky dishwasher. And when we had that changed, my dogs stopped eating, and I got really sick overnight. All the symptoms returned. And I used to be to the point where I would walk into a moldy building, and immediately I would have like a whole body panic response. Or even worse, I get mold rage, which is a thing. I remember one time my kids were kind of young, and I got exposed to mold, and I just remember yelling at my kids, like in a way I would never do. And I'm like, what is happening right now? And of course I apologized later, but I'm sure it wasn't good for him, because mold has the ability to hijack your nervous system, because your body, it doesn't understand mold toxins, which is different from mold itself. The toxins that mold makes, it's kind of like penicillin is a concentrated mold toxin. That one little pill has a huge effect on your body. If you're getting that absorbed through your skin from your house, but it's not the good penicillin, it's a poison, or you're breathing it, man, it's going to mess you up, and it's going to have systemic effects. So I just realized I got a problem, and I went through and I did everything you could do to detox my body. And I became aware of how important it was to look at mold in structures and just to control moisture levels and water. Mold has the ability to hijack your nervous system, because your body, it doesn't understand mold toxins, which is different from mold itself. The toxins that mold makes, it's kind of like penicillin is a concentrated mold toxin. That one little pill has a huge effect on your body. If you're getting that absorbed through your skin from your house, but it's not the good penicillin, it's a poison, or you're breathing it, man, it's going to mess you up, and it's going to have systemic effects. So I just realized I got a problem, and I went through and I did everything you could do to detox my body. And I became aware of how important it was to look at mold in structures and just to control moisture levels and water. Along the way, I shot a documentary that I funded called Moldy Movie, and it's helped, I'm guessing, about 1 million people now become aware of mold, because no one would believe it at the beginning. So I interviewed a dozen top experts, including Mark Hyman, who had mold poisoning, and actually helped him diagnose his mold poisoning, because it feels so random. Different people get different things. I interviewed a dozen high-performing people who were just taken offline by mold, and a dozen top experts. And you cannot watch it. It's an hour. It's free. moldymovie.com. You cannot watch that and go, oh, mold isn't real. So it's meant for doctors or for spouses who don't believe it. Because what's scary about this is mitochondria are so low level in the body, depending on which mold toxins you have. They might attack your mitochondria at the lining of your nerves. They're tied to MS and Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and cancer and cardiovascular disease and diabetes even, because they're biological dysregulators. Yeah. But if there was mold in this room right now, depending on the species, I might have one set of symptoms like brain fog and dizziness, and you might say, I don't feel anything, but 2 days later, I've got a rash, right? And so I found a lot of couples were really fighting over it, because one of the two has genetics that makes them more susceptible. So they're getting crazy symptoms, and the other one's like, I get a stuffy nose sometimes, but it's just not a big deal. And so you think the other person's crazy until you realize different people get affected, but one person may get, Alzheimer's, and the other person may just say, I don't really feel anything, but then they get cancer. And today I run a concierge longevity medicine practice along with a top longevity doctor. And one of our clients in her early 40s, we tested, and she had serious brain fog, but she has what's essentially advanced Alzheimer's disease, and she's in her 40s with 2 young kids. And what happened? Their basement got flooded. And she has the very clear signs. We see the mycotoxins, we see the inflammation, we see the genetics that make her susceptible, and we see the brain stuff. That's how powerful it is. But her husband, I feel fine, right? So I want people to understand this is deadly serious. And the fact that a person in the room with you feels mold and you don't, it doesn't mean that it's not there. And we have the ability to test for it in the environment. We have the ability to test for it in the body today. And the problem has always been, well, what do you do? And you can do what the Bible says. If you go back, I don't remember which chapter and all, but Leviticus, there you go. It says literally, if there's black mold, clean everything. And if it comes back in 10 days, burn everything.
Take it outside the city and burn it.
Yeah. And so we've known about this for 2,000 years, yet somehow we just don't talk about it. And the reason this is so important, I'm talking with some of the people in the government about troop readiness. Every barracks is full of mold, and you cannot perform at your best in mold, even if it's not affecting you very much. And every university, every high school, every elementary school has mold because they don't spend money on maintaining the buildings. And I remember when I was at the University of California, the library had like standing water and people were complaining about getting sick in it, but this is like how it is.
Yeah.
So most government buildings, most libraries, they're all full of it. And so there's people who know they've been exposed to mold and they just won't go into those buildings. And everyone else who goes in there, they're getting sicker and sicker, and they're spending more and more on drugs, and they wonder why their relationships have gone to hell, their hormones are disrupted. All of this can be attributed to mold. And mold's additive with all the other environmental toxins and lack of sleep and eating junk food and all that, but it's a much bigger part of the burden. And the way mold enters the body is by breathing it, by absorbing through the skin, and by eating it. And so, Danger Coffee, I lab test the coffee using proprietary methods to make sure that there's no mold in it. And then any home that I own or spend a lot of time in, I test the air, I test the dust, I make sure that I've treated the HVAC system right. And along the way, I ended up inventing a probiotic that I could spray around. And it's very affordable and it helps, but it doesn't solve the whole problem. You have to keep doing it. And if it's inside a wall, what do you do? And so I've been searching for years for what do I tell people to do that's affordable, because ripping out your whole kitchen is kind of an expensive thing. And I've had to do that twice. So replacing your HVAC system, very expensive. So what are we going to do about this? Because most people aren't going to do that. And then you're just kind of stuck, especially if you own the home. And so I was really excited when we got to connect, because you've got something that I was thinking I have to go invent that superstratum is like a long-term solution for mold. And I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah. But that's the story. Man, this is personal.
Yeah, it is personal. And, of course it's personal for myself and for our team as well. And you said something that I thought was such a great point. And it is what I find is the reason why most people are not aware of this problem. Or let's say when they're experiencing the problem, it's the main issue in them seeing the problem. And it's the difference, like you say, in how we think about germ theory. And if you have a cold and we're in the same environment and I get the same symptoms, then we naturally, I'm going to assume that came from you and that somehow is a part of our environment. But when the symptoms don't match, then we, because of the way that we've been indoctrinated in this understanding of our environments, to think that there's not a correlation there. And like you brought up, this is not a germ that gets into your body. This is toxicity in the body, and that behaves completely differently. And the issues with relationships, now those are we haven't even talked about yet the what mold does to the body, but then you move on into the interpersonal and all the ways it impacts your life, and it's tremendous. And we were equally as excited to meet you, certainly because of your reputation in the space and your own personal story, but also for Home Biotic. And when we look at the reason that SuperStratum really exists is because we started our company with some very powerful technology, our endurance coating, which I know you're a very big fan of. But what we realized very quickly, which I think is the same thing that you realized on your journey with Home Biotic, even if you have a good technology, one product doesn't solve the whole problem.
Yeah.
And
it's complex and sneaky.
It's very complex. It's very sneaky. You're dealing with the sneakiest kingdom, in the entire, the mold kingdom in and of itself is it's older than probably anything else here.
If you think about it, for 2 billion years, there's been a war between bacteria.
Yep.
Your mitochondria are ancient bacteria.
Yep.
And fungus.
Yep.
And they've been fighting all that time, right? And so it's no wonder that mold is such a low-level toxin former for humans. And it will eat us when we die. And it's happy for us to die sooner so it can eat us. And I remember my parents had a dream to live in Alaska over a winter. So when they retired, they did it. And my dad had a calcium score very low. He did the thing to look at his cardiovascular health. They lived in a house that I went up to visit them, and I was disabled for 6 weeks afterwards. It was the moldiest place I've ever been in. Because every winter for 40 years, the owners had boiled a kettle. And so you have this moist air and freezing cold walls. So the inside of all the walls was just covered in mold. And both of my parents started having really weird symptoms. Bruising for no reason, which is a common one, weird nightmares, changes in their gait, they'd fall over a lot, dizziness, visual distortions, frequent respiratory stuff. And my dad had a heart attack with full calcification 6 months later.
Wow.
And we measured before. I am 100% certain that it was that mold exposure that drove those biological changes.
Wow.
So, and I'm not just saying that, there's a set of books written by a WHO researcher who spent about 17 years studying mold. And this was before the WHO got purchased and corrupt. And he published a series of books called Fungal Bionics. And these books, they were $400 for each edition because they weren't available in the US. They were from Germany. And I bought them all. And each one was like, here's the link between mold and diabetes. And the book is this thick, full of research reports. And here's the link with mold and cancer, and mold and breast cancer, and mold and heart disease, and mold and Alzheimer's. And the link is very clear. And there's thousands of studies that support this. And even worse, maybe it's not worse, but it's pretty bad. I used to weigh 300 pounds, and I weigh about 195 right now. And I've been fat since I was a teenager, and no matter how little I ate, no matter how much I worked out, no matter what I did, I could not lose the weight. I could lose half of it, the other half would just stick around. And it turns out there's this sneaky mold toxin called zearalenone. And zearalenone mimics human estrogen, but it's 10,000 times stronger. And it's so potent that they concentrate zearalenone into little pellets and sell it to ranchers, because they put a little zearalenone in the ear of a cow and it'll melt into their bloodstream. And that cow will get fat on 30% less food. I was getting treated with this mold toxin in my bedroom that was making me obese no matter how little I ate.
Wow. And
people would just say, eat less and work out more. No, that doesn't work.
Yes.
Right?
It's one of the most common things we see. And zearalenone, especially for women, because it's an estrogen mimicker, what it does to the hormones, to fertility, and that is actually one of the most common mycotoxins that we find in homes now.
It is so dangerous, and it's crazy what happens with your hormones with mold, because mold also will disrupt your thyroid, and your thyroid gives you energy every day. So now I'm so tired, I just can't do anything. And then you have massive amounts of estrogen, and suddenly you have man boobs, which I had for much of my life, don't have them anymore. And it's so sneaky, because that level of estrogen is just bad for everyone. And it's not the good estrogen. And it turns out I don't have a liver that makes the right stuff to detox that. But knowing these things was important. Because otherwise I would have just been, well, I guess I'm kind of a fat slob, and no matter what I do, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
One of the things that was, well, validating for me is I interviewed Dr. Amen from Amen Clinics, who's done more brain scans than what I know. He was part of me discovering what had happened. I was in Wharton Business School, and I was failing out of my classes. I thought, man, maybe I'm actually dumber than I think I am, right? And I'm trying hard, but nothing works. Like there's no memory there. And I was being exposed to mold at the time. So I went and I got a brain scan where they inject radioactive sugar, and they look at metabolic activity in the brain. And I remember going to the psychiatrist, and he kind of looks at me, and he's like, "Oh, tech bro wants Adderall." like we've seen this before, right? Because a lot of people want to do Adderall, and I didn't want Adderall, but it's not a very nice drug. But I got the scan, and I came back, and he just looked at me so different, and he said, "Dave, inside your brain is total chaos. You have the best camouflage I've ever seen. I don't know how you're standing here in front of me right now." Because there were huge chunks of the front of my brain, the prefrontal cortex, where there was zero metabolic activity.
Wow.
And when Dr. Amen looked at the scan, he said, "Dave, you had mold toxin-induced brain damage." Wow. And the good news here is I got a scan 10 years later, and it's gone. I fixed it. You can fix it. Get rid of the toxins, and you can fix your biology. And today I'm on the board of directors of Amen Clinics, and Dan Amen's become a good friend. But in that interview in Moldy Movie, he said, if you have toxic mold, no matter how little you eat, you will never lose weight. And so you're like, wow, I'm super emotional. I yell at my spouse. I'm puffy and I'm fat all the time. I have dark circles under my eyes. I have weird rashes. I keep getting sick. I yell at my family. I don't like myself. And I feel like at the end of the day, I can barely put one foot in front of the other. Well, it's because these toxins, they're affecting where energy comes from. And there's 2 studies directly showing that your mitochondrial health controls your willpower. So when people get mold, they lose their energy and they lose their willpower. And then it just feels like everything is climbing Everest. Like it's too much. And so you kind of get paralyzed in your life and like, I can't even pay my bills. I know I should, but I'm just so tired.
Yeah.
Right.
Which I'm sure isn't a coincidence that you become paralyzed in the environment where the mold is when you get mold poisoning.
Yeah. Like if it was
once you're there.
Yeah, if it was a snake in a bit, you like I got paralyzed, but then you'd see it. But if you're getting paralyzed over the course of a month or 6 months or a year, it's so slow that we just don't pick it up. Yeah. And your immune system, it's really good at finding bacteria. And it can even find like a fungus growing in the body sometimes. But what mold does is it takes out the immune system, which is why most people have Lyme disease. If you look at it, they actually have mold poisoning. You get rid of the mold and the Lyme resolves because 95% of people have the Lyme spirochete in their body. They don't have any symptoms. Only the people who get mold get Lyme. And I'm talking about research from UCLA when I say that. I'm not saying there isn't Lyme disease. I tested positive for it. I also just had mold. And treating the Lyme didn't work. Treating the mold worked. So people oftentimes have mold as an underlying cause of another disease. Even things like kidney stones directly tied to mold. And the mold that's very common in environments is OTA, or upper toxin A. And OTA is also the most common mold in coffee. And since I've been exposed to OTA in multiple homes, I can feel mold in the coffee. Yeah. And it turns out 28% of people have a mutation that makes them more susceptible to mold. And it's in the HLA-DR4 part of your genetics. And this is a mutation that is really good if there's a famine, or if there's maybe you're Northern European or you're part of wherever you're from, and your job was to go to the neighboring village and then basically take an arrow in the back and not bleed out so your blood clots quickly, and then be exposed to the microbiome of all the stuff you're stealing, right? And then not get sick from that because your immune system is highly active, and then go home, enjoy the spoils of war, and then do it again. Right? If your people have been doing that for a while, you're much more likely to have these genetics, and we can measure it now. And those are the people who tend to get really sick because your immune system goes, there's an invader. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to get really inflamed. I'm going to get really irritated, right? And because we're good on famines with these genetics, we recycle our bile, which is a fatty substance. And mold toxins primarily dissolve into the fat in your tissues. So the longer you're exposed, the more it gets into your brain, the lining of your nerves, and all the cell membranes made out of fat. So I like to have this picture of a glass of water, and you put 2 drops of blue food coloring in. And at first they're just on the surface, and then they slowly spread. That's what mold toxin does inside the body. So when you want to remove it from the body, it takes a little bit of time because you have to add more water to wash out the stuff. So you increase fat turnover, you increase detox pathways. And we know how to get people well from mold, but it can still be expensive. It can take time. It takes much less time now than it did 20 years ago when I was doing it. But would it be better if you just didn't get it because your house was built right, because you took a few steps, even if you didn't build the house, to just protect yourself and protect your kids by going to the high risk areas, checking them real quick, and then spraying them with something. So if the sink drips underneath it, which most sinks do at some point, let's not have a problem there. Yeah. Right? Let's go to the place around the window where it's always a little bit moist, and let's just make sure that nothing ever goes there.
Yeah.
That's the goal. So you never have to go through all this detox. You don't have to lose your energy. You don't have to lose your fertility. And there's something else about fertility that I found in my research about mold that is shocking and disturbing. See, the people who really understand mold are farmers and ranchers. So they measure the mold in food that they feed their animals, and they will not feed moldy food to animals that are going to get pregnant or are pregnant, because the number of miscarriages goes through the roof and they can't make any money. But what they will do is the 3 months before they sell the animals, they'll feed it the moldy food because they don't care if it gets sick as long as it's not dead. Yeah. So we're actually getting molds in industrially fed meat, but those farmers know about mold and fertility. And right now we have a fertility crisis where a lot of people can't get pregnant or they can't carry a healthy baby, and mold is a major culprit. And the other thing that's weird about mold, if it's in your home, in your workplace, in your car, which is a major source, what you end up doing is you get the mold, and then your toxic metals go through the roof, like mercury and lead, because mold is disabling detox pathways. So now everything else in the environment gets worse and worse and worse, so it's additive. So I'm like, let's prevent the problem. If you know you have that one room in your house that smells a bit funky, but you just open the window, like, no, not okay. And I couldn't tell people what to do. I'm like, well, you could run a little ozone, which is hard to do and expensive, and it kind of works. But with the technology that you have at Superstratum, it's like, no, you can actually treat that room fully and kill everything, right? And after everything's dead, you can hit it with some homebiotic, you can hit it with permanent coatings that Superstratum makes that completely protect the moisture-prone surfaces. And maybe you're gonna look at your air conditioning and figure out why there's moisture in there. But if you were just do that, that whole like set of dominoes that happens in your health over time, it stops, and it saves you at least tens of thousands of dollars in getting well, and sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it could be the difference between having a healthy baby and having no baby at all.
Yeah.
And like this is fundamental, and it's cheap compared to the costs of having mold. So let's get this to the point where every public structure gets treated with this, because we're worth it. And all of our homes are that way. And the sad thing is, there is a correlation between income and mold. And I have a friend with a 34-bedroom house. He had to just basically move out of because it was built wrong, has mold. But if you're in a mobile home, you're in an RV, right? If you're living in your car, like you're in a house that's had no maintenance for a long time, there's a guarantee that there's mold, and it's something that you're not gonna even know about or be able to fix. But now there's a cost-effective way to do it. And this is something that is kind of personal, because one thing that mold does do, and I have Dr. Amen, who's scanned more than 1 million brains and is a leading psychiatrist with, I think, 12 New York Times bestsellers, so a credible guy. He says straight up that mold can drop your IQ by 15 points. And you get rid of the mold, your IQ goes back up. And mine did. So I'm not as dumb as I was. So, man, this is a big deal. And so there's all kinds of things you do to make your life better. I mean, I'm the guy behind intermittent fasting and cold plunges and red light therapy, and I do all those things, but I would spend all of my money on getting mold out of my house before I would do these other biohacks that cost money.
Yeah.
The other thing that mold does, massive disruptions in sleep. One of the symptoms that you're in a moldy environment is weird, vivid nightmares. So if you move into a new house, you're in an Airbnb, a lot of those are moldy because they turn the AC off when no one's there. And you wake up like, wow, I had the craziest dream. It was so real, and there was something trying to kill me. And like, I don't normally have that kind of dream. That's your body going, I am sensing something, but I can't tell what it is. Because mold toxins they're very tiny molecules, and they look a lot like cholesterol because they're fat soluble. And your immune system is generally primed to find a big fungus or a big bacteria, but not a tiny little molecule that kind of looks familiar. So they get around the immune system, then they get into the immune cells and all the other cells, and they start poisoning the cells. So the body's like, I know that I'm sick. I know something's wrong. I can't tell what it is. And it's trying to tell you, like, something's off. I've not had a full ability to tell people, here's what to do in your home, other than throw a match in it and make sure you have insurance.
Yeah.
And that's where Superstratum comes in.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. We're here at your house, and, you know, a lot of people have mold. Well, obviously, a lot of people have mold. Have to deal with it in different ways. I mean, there's some cases in which you have to remediate. You've got mold growing inside of your walls. We tell people you need to rip that mold out. But like you're saying, it's really the mycotoxins. It's the leftover. It's all of these things that get left in the house after, right? That blue food coloring, like you described in the body, the home's the same way, right?
Yes.
The air in that home, the surfaces. And that's what Superstratum and Home Biotic, really set out to solve. It says, okay, how do we bridge that gap between ripping your house apart, and removing gross, slimy mold that's growing?
And you do need to do that.
You do, right? But also that doesn't get you the full way for most of the people who are suffering. So how do we detox the home? And, we came down here to Austin, to your house, because you have the perfect opportunity to do that. You've got a beautiful home that doesn't have really any systemic issues with mold. We had a little issue in the attic that you've got a plan for, replacing some of the plenums. You're doing the number one thing we always recommend for people, which is addressing the HVAC and also the split unit that we looked at in your building. The air, of course, when there's mold in those, that's where you're going to get exposed the most. So we've got a good plan there. But with Superstratum and Home Biotic, what we're really doing here is we are bombing the house. Well, let's back up a little bit. First, we're going to come in fog, and we've got all the equipment here and the building cleaner that we'll use to do that. That fog's the hypochlorous acid that'll get on all the surfaces, break down those mycotoxins. When you brought up ochre toxin, that was one of the specific mycotoxins that we tested. And without even a wipe, just from a fog landing on the surface, there's 100% reduction in ochre toxin from the building.
Wow. And this is different. It's not killing the mold. It's killing the equivalent of the penicillin, the toxin made by the mold.
Exactly, and that's an issue because there's lots of chemicals out there that can kill mold. Some of them are toxic themselves. Some of them do it better than others. But none of those chemicals are oxidizers that are strong enough to destroy the chemical. And that's what the building cleaner and the whole system, as well as the deodor bombs, are designed to do. Designed to clean up all that chemical contamination. And then once we're done with that, we bring in the Home Biotic. And why don't you talk a little bit about Home Biotic and how you came about it and how it works within our system?
So in healthy soil, there's always fungus. And the environment requires fungus. And most fungus is pretty harmless. In fact, we eat a lot of mushrooms, right? The problem is when it gets in homes, that it's usually the 200 or so toxic species, maybe even up to 400, that are out there that make toxins that are really bad for us. They love wet paper, which is what drywall is made out of, right? So if there's humidity, even from body humidity, or from cooking, or from taking showers, or from just cold air and it's hot and moist outside. And San Diego's just a whole mold bomb because the whole place is moist from the sea and everyone's air conditioned, and like this stuff happens. So the issue then is, if healthy soil has fungus that's not the bad stuff, why? And it's because it has about 9 species of bacteria that live in the soil that naturally compete with the mold and keep it in check. Sort of like you get too many deer if you don't have some predators that eat the deer, so then they're in balance. And what we have in our homes today is we have people really sterilizing as best they can, and then the mold just goes crazy because most of what people are doing doesn't work at all for mold. And so now it's like, I got no competition. So we identified these 9 species of mold, and you can mist with Homebiotic, which restores those 9 bacteria that live in soil, so then they get into the home, and then they compete with the mold. And their job is to actually eat the roots, the hyphae that come out of a mold spore. They'll eat those as they come out, right? And some of them can even eat some of the mycotoxins. So now you have a natural competition. So a healthy home isn't sterile. A healthy home is just like a healthy gut. You need to have the right bacterial balance. So it's the world's first environmental probiotic. And you just mist it around. It's not terribly expensive. Problem is, if you have a lot of mold and you haven't done the cleanup first, it's like, oh, I planted some nice seeds in the middle of the weeds.
Right.
It's not gonna make that big of a difference, especially right away. So this idea that you come in with superstratum and you sterilize, you get rid of everything, and then you restore these healthy bacteria, and they'll live for quite a while there. And then you coat all the areas in the home where you want no bacteria and you want no mold with the superstratum coating. And then you end up with like incredibly strong protection in some places, and everywhere else you have this like cleanup crew bacteria that are in the home. So my plan for this property, which I just acquired, is we're going to go through and we're going to fog everything, right? And I tested the place. It had 1 species of mold that makes some toxins, but it's not high levels. But I could see some mold on the air conditioning vents where there was condensation, so we've already cleaned that off. But I know the HVAC has an issue because it wasn't properly insulated, and so we found that. So I'm replacing the parts of the HVAC that were rusted through, replacing where the water leaked on the floor from condensation in the attic, and then we're going to bomb everything. So now we have sterilization up there. We're going to do a little bit of Homebiotic mist up there, and I'm going to coat all the high-risk surfaces, and that's going to provide amazing protection. But the one area in every home I've ever lived in that has the biggest problem is the inside of the ductwork and the inside of the AC. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and spray, after we clean them, the vents, we're going to spray the inside of them with superstratum's coating, which is perfect because it lasts for a decade, possibly more.
Yeah.
Nothing will grow in those vents, even if there's some condensation or something like that. And to me, that's precious. And this is so cheap. I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on mold remediation for my homes. And this was not much money at all to work with superstratum. And I know that every surface in this home will be mold-free. The air will be mold-free. And it's not expensive compared to anything else I've ever done. So I'm incredibly stoked about this. And then one of the other things I'm doing is the home that I'm in now had high humidity levels because of an AC problem. So just the air was wet for a while. So that creates the potential for mold or mycotoxins. And one thing that happens so often, and this is tragic, okay, you have a home, you've lived there for a while, you have books, you have a bed, you have couches, you have all your things. And then like, oh no, I have mold. Well, these mycotoxins are very small particles. They get on everything. And if you, okay, I'm going to fix my health, I'm going to move to a new home, and I'm going to bring my moldy furniture with me, you will remain sick. So you have to throw away all your stuff. Those people with mold, you already have job stress. There's financial stress. Everyone has financial stress right now. And you're going, so you're telling me I'm going to have to sell my house, or I'm going to have to rent a new place, which is expensive. And you want to throw away all my possessions that aren't, metal or stone or glass or plastic? Like, I can't afford that. So what the heck would you do? Well, what I'm going to do to make sure that I have a perfectly clean environment is all the things from my old home. We're going to also fog or bomb those with superstratum. I'm going to treat them with Homebiotic as well, right? I'm going to HEPA vacuum them to make sure that there's no particles left. And I'm salvaging all the things that have been exposed to a higher level of humidity than you want.
Yep.
And what I do now, which is funny because this is in Moldy Movie and I just wasn't doing it in my old home, is have a humidity gauge. And you want around 50%, maybe 45%. If you're too high or too low, mold loves to grow. So there's a good range. And I was up to 65% in the old home, which was the problem. And if I'd have just looked at a gauge or put one in because I was lazy to do it, and I'm actually working with another company we're going to talk about at some point that has humidity monitoring kind of built into your health monitoring. So the goal is, I don't want to think about it. I want to know my home is safe. This is a one-time thing I'm going to have to do. And I'll probably touch it up again with foggers and I'll do home biotic every quarter or something like that, just in high risk areas. But this place will be the cleanest home I've ever lived in. And yeah, I'm going to run air filters too, because, well, you should do that anyway. I live in Austin, we have cedar and things like that. And I'm going to make sure that there's no dust in my home, because dust is the single biggest way mold gets in your body. So I'll make sure that I vacuum, or more to the point, probably my house cleaner will. But I'm going to use a HEPA vacuum. But the amount of protection that I would have had even in the place I was living before, when the humidity levels rose, if I'd have treated that home with superstratum, it would have radically reduced my risk. So perfection is not required. You just want to set yourself up for success. And if you have to remediate mold, you may have to remove some stuff, but the superstratum treatment with multiple products and adding some home biotic at the right stage, it's the lowest cost way to minimize risk that I can think of. And that said, if you have drainage, rain's pooling under your house, your foundation's always wet, your carpet is soggy wet, you have to deal with the water. Yeah. But for most of us, fix the roof leak, get rid of the moldy stuff, superstratum everything, bomb everything, fog everything, home biotic everything, vacuum everything, and it's not gonna destroy your bank account. And that's the gift. Because otherwise mold is a massive financial hit. Between the health and the home, it can easily be $250,000. And who has that?
You're exactly right. And what you just said, that was the intention behind superstratum. Like you said with the body, sometimes it can be expensive to get mold out of the body. It can take a long time, but there's a way to do it. Mm-hmm. We wanted to create the same thing for the home. It was expensive, you can't get mold out of the home, but how you detox the home, how you get that cloudy blue water into clear water again, doing that in a cost-effective manner was impossible. Mm-hmm. And we talked to so many people who had spent hundreds of thousands, who had done everything. They're washing their clothes in vinegar, they're throwing everything away. I mean, they're in this cycle of losing everything. And the way we're moving your contents in is a great way we encourage people to do that, where you have them in your old home, but before you move them in, we're moving it into the garage. Yep. So all the wiping down and vacuuming and the bombing can happen in the garage, so that before you move any of those contents in, you won't have any exposure. This is fantastic. We're excited to be here. We're gonna get some footage of us walking around the house and doing some of the work. I know you've got another crew working on the HVAC this week. But this was an amazing conversation. It's great to hear your story, and I'm, again, so excited for this project.